You are now live.
I am calling to order the regular meeting of the governing body for January the 10th. It is 5:04 p.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilor Chavez. Salute to the New Mexico flag led by Councilor Castro. And then Councilor Michael Garcia will lead us in invocation and remembrances, followed by others who have someone they'd like to remember. Please rise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today, I'd like to recite a prayer in memory of a fond community member, Mr. Jay Toya, who passed away earlier this week. He was a brother in faith, so I'm going to recite this prayer in his honor. It's a oración a Nuestra Señora de la Paz. Oh, Nuestra Señora de la Paz, patrona y reina nuestra, prometida en el pasado Edén, como la mujer cuya semilla apartaría la cabeza de la serpiente. Ayúdanos y a conquistar todas las malas que nos quieren dar aún más en nuestros corazones, y esto con la gracia y vuestro sacramento, Hijo Jesucristo, Dios y Redentor nuestro. Oh Nuestra Señora de la Paz, patrona y reina nuestra, por medio de vuestra maternidad de Salvador, quien es verdadero Dios y verdadero hombre, ayudamos a verse en todo hered que atane la persona de Jesucristo y a su iglesia que estableció para su gloria eterna y nuestra salvación. Oh Señora de la Paz, patrona y reina nuestra, por de Jesucristo, quieren en el príncipe de la paz y nuestra universidad convertir por el divino poder de Dios, cuyo poder sobresale todo poder humano, todos los infieles y todos los enemigos de la paz de Cristo. Oh Nuestra Señora de la Paz, patrona y reina nuestra, conquistar eficazmente con vuestra hermosa inmacula nuestros corazones, para que, unidos con vuestro divino Hijo, en fin podamos glorificarle en esta vida y victoriosamente conciliarle, y después contigo y con todos los santos gozarle eternamente en la vida posterior. Así sea. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there others who wish to speak? Councilor Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to honor the life of Jay. He was a dear friend. And I told myself I wasn't going to break down, but he was a very close, dear friend. Who didn't know Jay Toya? I don't know. Everybody that I talk to, they say, hi, I knew Jay. Most recently, he served on our planning commission, and for whatever reason had to resign, but met Jay about 20 years ago. Became really good friends. He served as my cacique when I was de Vargas in 2012, and I'm gonna miss him dearly. I think that when we go around town and I talk to people, and it's just so new that the gravity really hasn't hit. But for me, I just pray for his family, pray for his friends. And que mi tatita Dios y Madre María Santísima siempre lo cuida y lo lleva a su santa gloria, hermano. Que descanse en paz.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cassidy?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I also want to take the opportunity to recognize the life of Jay Toya. I met Jay 4 years ago, a little bit more than that, as he often helps many of us on our bank accounts for our campaigns. And I found going to the bank became one of my favorite parts of campaigning because of Jay. We also, this last year, his grandson and my son played on the same T-ball team. And was just such a positive, opening, welcome person. And, you know, I think that we see so many people closing off these days. And Jay was always a reminder of the benefits of reaching out and the benefits of just assuming that everybody is a friend you haven't met yet. And he was really just an incredible light. So prayers to his family, to his friends, and we are truly going to miss him. We really did lose an incredible human in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Lindell?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to honor the life of my neighbor Harold Huffman, who was called to his greater rewards this morning. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Huffman, fighter pilot, Vietnam. And just a guy that when you drove home, you hoped he was outside because you wanted to say hello to him. So positive all the time, a true patriot. I remember when we built our house, and our house obstructed their view that they'd had for years and years and years. And he came out when we were out there with a bulldozer and this and that was going on. And I thought, oh boy, here it comes. And he says, oh my God, we can't wait to have neighbors. Who's like that? He was a terrific neighbor. Condolences to his wife, Maria Bunny Huffman, and we'll miss Harold. He was just an absolute definition of a good neighbor.
I'd add my own thoughts about Jay, who was meant so much to so many people. And I share in that view that everybody's already expressed. I also call to mind someone who was written up in the New Mexican, who did a lot for our community and passed away, Jimmy Martinez. Served on this governing body, served on the school board, was an early champion for the living wage before it was even a thing, and really embodied a sense of community and doing the right thing for people who are the working people of Santa Fe. So thoughts and prayers there as well. Let's take a minute and think about those folks as well as everyone in our community who is suffering, who is ill, who is homeless on these cold nights, who has no place to be safe. Let's reach out to everyone in our community and keep them safe and keep them in our hearts. Let's have a moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Cassett,
Here.
Counselor Castro,
Present.
Counselor Chavez, Counselor Faulkner, Counselor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Present.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth.
Here.
Mayor Weber,
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda as it's been presented to us?
We're going to remove item 8C, the annual code of ethics training, and schedule it for a later date.
Move to approve as amended.
Counselor Garcia's hand is up.
I noted that item N is on consent and it hadn't been through any committees. And so I didn't know if that was an error, if it should have been on discussion or if it should have been sent to committees, because it's definitely a topic I would have loved to discuss at the committee level.
Point of order, it was at Public Works, Public Utilities passed on consent, and the Finance Committee had a good conversation about it on Monday night, and it also passed there.
Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you, Counselor.
I think if I understand which one you're talking about, that is correct. It's N as in the on consent.
Yes.
Yeah. It did actually go through those, but that doesn't mean, and I understand you've pulled it from consent, so we can have some more conversation about it.
No, I pulled, N. I apologize. I'm looking at my notes wrong. Q.
I'm sorry.
I pulled N for discussion.
Yeah, you
Oh, I
did.
need to recuse. It's item Q.
Ah,
Sorry for the misstatement.
that's good. It's good to get the
The
right.
new seat that I'm in, it's kind of throwing the universe off.
Yeah, that did not go through any other committees.
We'll move that to discussion, Mayor.
Thank you. So we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, and we have a correction to the agenda. Can we call the roll on the motion, please?
Yes, Mayor. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez, Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. And now let's go to the consent agenda, and I believe Counselor Garcia, you have asked to pull item N. Am I correct about that?
That is correct. And as well, I'd like to pull item O to recuse myself. No staff was needed for that.
Thank you. N and O would both be taken off of consent. Are there any other changes to the consent agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve it as amended.
Motion to amended. Second.
Is there discussion? Madam Clerk, can you call the roll on that, please?
Certainly, Mayor. Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. With that, then, Madam Clerk, take us to the first item on 8A.
The first item, 8A, is an audit update and overview, and Finance Director Emily Oster is here to present.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body. Look, very happy to be here with you tonight. Glad that we have a new year and I have some good information to share with you tonight. We received the okay to print communication from the state auditor yesterday for the FY22 audit. So that's exciting, a step forward in the process. We are working through the comments from the state auditor's office with our external auditor, Carr Riggs Ingram, and our accounting consultants, Clifton Larson Allen. The next step will be to submit the final version of the report back to the state auditor's office, and I expect that early next week. So we're working towards the finalization and the public release of the FY22 audit report, which is great. Meanwhile, we continue to work very heavily on the FY23 audit. And that is my update for this evening. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? Yes, Counselor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Oster. I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Is there a date for that release?
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Castro, so regarding the FY22 audit, the process after this step is complete, it goes back to the state auditor's office and they conduct another review. So there isn't a specific date. But in terms of our part of it, of responding to their comments and getting it back to them, I expect that to be complete by early next week.
Thank you so much.
Other questions? Thank you, Director Oster. Madam Clerk, the next item, please.
Certainly, Mayor. The next item is the annual parliamentary procedure training, and City Attorney Erin McSherry is here to present.
Thank you, Mayor Weber, councilors. Can we put up the presentation? This is a delayed presentation from the orientation last week. Marcos is out sick today, so that's why we're delaying the ethics training. And we'll see if there's room on the next agenda to do it then, and if so, we'll do it then. So we do have materials in your packet, but there's a requirement in the code to do an annual parliamentary training. And I spoke with our parliamentarian, Councilor Merriworth, in advance a little bit to talk about some of the things to make sure I included, and then I'm doing a general overview as well. Have that coming up, but there's a few my own here reasons we do this. One is to just refresh our memories. Two is the requirement in general, and give the opportunity to ask some questions. I have it in front of me. Are we gonna be able to put it up on the screen? Okay, awesome. So we can go to the second slide. Okay. So basically, the code requires that we adopt a complete set of rules of order, and the governing body adopted your updated policies and procedures for rules of order on January 2 years ago in 2022. The rules hadn't been updated in a long time before that. The mayor, do you want me can I just do this? Has appointed Councilor Merworth to be the parliamentarian, and that's also required in the same section of the code that requires the complete set of rules of order. And then annually, we're required to provide an overview to the governing body. So that's what this is. And parliamentary law is more than just Robert's rules. So Robert's rules is often what people think about. But for a legislative body in the United States and in New Mexico, we have to also follow the United States Constitution and the New Mexico Constitution and the cases interpreting them. There's also applicable state statutes. There's the city charter. We have city ordinances that relate to legislative procedures. We have your procedural rules. Then we have Robert's rules. And then there's also custom as consistent with applicable rules. So for examples of constitutional parliamentary law, we often talk about due process in relation to our quasi-judicial proceedings. So that's where that comes from, is the US and New Mexico Constitution. And that's where if someone is having their rights adjudicated during a public meeting, then we have to look at those due process protections. And also First Amendment limitations. And that relates to why we try to give the same amount of time to all speakers. Once we provide public comment in a meeting, we need to treat everyone equally at that point. We can't say we only want to hear from you if you have a particular perspective or something like that. That would be a First Amendment problem. Statutory parliamentary law, I think the best examples are the Open Meetings Act, which we had a training about last week. And then also the requirement that we give 2 weeks notice before final action on bills that become law that govern the public. And there's an exception to that for emergencies. So we would follow that if there were an emergency. And I think the only time we've ever used that exception for an ordinance, a law governing the public, was during the pandemic, for a pretty limited matter, I believe. So charter parliamentary law includes the mayor's right to vote on all matters. So that's the type of thing that could be governed by Robert's rules, but we govern it in our charter. Examples of parliamentary law that's in our ordinance includes the roles during governing body meetings, including the fact that, for example, I'm supposed to attend the meetings, the city manager is supposed to attend the meetings. The clerk has specific duties during meetings. If those were not in other law, we would look to Robert's rules, but we have them in our ordinances. We also have a requirement and ordinance requiring fiscal impact reports. So then our local rules are our procedural rules, which we adopted in 2022. And then the city council standing committee rules are an example of another local rule. We also have procedural rules for committees other than standing committees of city councilors. And those are pretty old. And I know there's been some thought of updating those. They're over a decade old. We have augmented them to some degree with regard to hybrid meetings and remote meetings through a separate resolution. So that's another example of a local rule for our non-policy making committees of the city. And those are, yeah, so they were last updated in 2009, the rules for non-city council standing committees. And the remote meetings resolution was the most recently adopted local rule in July of 2022. And that allows our non-policy making committees to vote to meet entirely remotely if they wish to do so. That's not really something that other committees can do if they're subject to the Open Meetings Act. So other than for that exception of remote meetings, the city is holding its committees that are not policymaking to the Open Meetings Act standards as well, which is not required, but the city has decided to do that other than the remote meetings permission. Okay, so when do Robert's rules apply? It's when there's not an existing law or local rule on the topic. And how do customs work? So we have a few customs that I'm aware of that we've been using in our proceedings. And so that's a way of proceeding that's not included in any formal rule. It might even be contrary to a local rule, but we could adopt it as a rule. It's not illegal. So some examples of that are the friendly amendments. If someone takes a friendly amendment, if someone were to call a point of order on a friendly amendment, that would not be allowed because Robert's rules doesn't allow it and none of our local rules allow it. Another example is withdrawing motions and seconds to motions without a vote. So that's something we often do in this body. And as long as everyone thinks it's reflecting what the governing body wishes to do at that point, and it's allowing the meeting to honor the majority interest and protecting the minority ability to speak to the point of other rules, then that's fine. But if a point of order were called on one of those things that is a custom but is contrary to a local rule, then the local rule would govern. Okay. Ideally, if you have your procedural rules with you, I want to do a quick overview and maybe highlight a couple things. The purpose, definitions, and governing body sections of your procedural rules are primarily restating things that are elsewhere. The one definition I wanted to highlight is the definition for packet material. I think that's one of the few definitions that's not already somewhere else. And that means the minimum documents necessary to take action on an item. So most everything else in here is defined elsewhere, and this is just putting it in one place. Let's see, then we go to, and I just wanted to highlight a couple things under the mayor and presiding officer. So in the mayor's absence, the Councilor Lindell, in this case, the mayor pro tem is the presiding officer. And if both Mayor Weber and Councilor Lindell were unavailable, then the mayor could designate someone else to be the presiding officer. So that could come up. And the primary responsibility of the presiding officer, whoever it is to make sure that the meeting proceeds in an orderly democratic fashion. And that's what all these rules are aimed to accomplish. So that's the lens through which we try to read them. The next section I wanted to highlight. So if you move to page 5, which is section 4, it's the legislative process. Marcy E. Honorino, our legislative and policy office manager, went through most of this process. So I'm not going to go through what she already went through. But I did just want to highlight that the legislative process section is helpful in the sense that it's in the order that things are supposed to occur. So it should be read somewhat like a timeline. And so I think that's important to keep in mind that these are supposed to be generally the order that things happen in. Let's see. And then a couple of things to highlight that I'm not sure we talked about last week is that during first comment on public bills, which is the second governing body for bills, There is an option of staff providing up to a 5-minute presentation. So that's something if you're sponsoring a bill and you want to work with staff on that's an option. It's not required. The idea is it's up to 5 minutes. And then it could be 0 minutes as well. I think sometimes it's been 0 minutes and it's just the staff memo that we've relied on. But if that's something you're interested in, it's something that is possible at that time. And then I think the other thing that we didn't spend much time on previously, which starts on page 6, are the different options for what can happen to a bill in committee. And there's very specific options, and really it's supposed to be one of those options. And this is the type of situation where our local rules are governing on how this process works versus, say, Robert's rules. So there's not all the motions available under Robert's rules. There's really just the motions available that are in the procedural rules. For example, you've got approve as amended, no recommendation, deny, refer to another committee, or postpone to a date certain. But the date certain is very limited in the procedural rules for legislation to being only one meeting in the future for standing committees. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Another thing to be aware of is that if a denial to pass legislation is unanimous by all members of the committee, not just by all members present, so it would have to be 5 members, then that piece of legislation stops. That's not the case if it just isn't a majority vote. So I think that's an important distinction between your local rules and maybe other legislative processes that you may have seen in other places, such as the state, for example, where only a majority can stop legislation. Here, it's 100% of the members. So that's an important distinction. You can refer to another committee if a committee was not initially referred. So one of our standing committees can do that. And you can also send it back to a committee if they've already heard it. I think those are all important. Lay on the table does just postpone something to later on in the meeting, but that is also possible. Let's see. Then, so those are the things I wanted to highlight on legislative process. I think we covered most of the other matters with Marcy's presentation last week. So then we move on to decorum. There is a whole section in the decorum section for the governing body. It mostly reflects what's in Robert's rules. I think we picked provisions of Robert's rules that weren't in the procedural rules previously. And so last 2 years ago when these were adopted, some of those Robert's rules were pulled in to highlight them for the decorum section. You'll notice that we highlight the types of meetings. Last week we had held study sessions, which is the 4th type of meeting in here, but regular meetings, special meetings, emergency meetings, and study sessions. Study sessions essentially are special meetings, but a couple of the differences that were highlighted in our procedural rules is that a quorum is not necessary to proceed. If a quorum is not there, then it's not really an official meeting, but sometimes there might be a situation where the opportunity to discuss something is desired, and we don't know if maybe a quorum will be there or not, so that we post it as an open meeting in case, but it's allowed to proceed without a quorum. Generally, we would not proceed for a regular meeting if there were not a quorum, and you wouldn't be able to take any action, and study sessions don't have any action anyway. A couple other things. So the next section is the meeting agenda preparation. I did want to highlight that the city manager prepares the agenda with consultation from other members of the city, and that if if governing body members are interested in something, the city manager can entertain reasonable requests. So that's the first provision under agenda preparation. The agenda preparation section is also where you would look to see if something is appropriate under consent or not. And that's where it does provide that if a matter hasn't gone to a committee, then generally it will not be on consent unless it meets one of these criteria, for example, minutes from another meeting, or routine or procedural matters with no fiscal impact, such as liquor hearings, findings of fact and conclusions of law, and the annual Open Meetings Act resolution. So those are some things you'll often see in consent, even if they did not go to a committee. A couple other things to highlight, and this relates to Geraldine mentioned some of these things in her emails this week about encouraging discussion with staff in advance. If you have technical questions or things that could be easily cleared up in advance of a meeting or during a council standing committee, So in order to be more efficient with the time of the meeting in general, if we can resolve any of those questions in advance of governing body meetings, the rules do encourage that. And this is where the procedure of alerting the city clerk's office about interest to remove an item, this is where that rule comes from as well. This is on page 12 under agenda and consent agenda. This is where we find the order of business that's generally in your agenda. Gonna be flipping pages pretty quick here. Couple other things I want to highlight in that section of the order of business. The communications from the governing body. I think something important to understand about that part is because there's no subject associated with communications from the governing body, it's very open as to what you might want to announce or alert others to or give kudos about or anything like that. Because that subject matter is not on the agenda. It's not a discussion. It's really more of a one-way announcement. And that's why there's a provision that says members may request information during that time, but discussion of a request during the meeting is not permitted because then you start discussing things that aren't on the agenda and haven't been noticed. So it's certainly a time to say, I'm interested in pursuing or researching a particular topic, that's fine, but engaging in discussion about that topic during that part of the meeting would have an open meetings problem. So that's why that provision is there. I do want to point out that on page 14 on the top, public comment on bills, we have noticed that there's a slight discrepancy in our rules between that section on page 14 and the earlier section in the legislative process. The earlier section says there's no discussion by governing body, and this part suggests that there is another 1-minute overview of the bill. I think we've been interpreting that as being the mistake, second part, because that's supposed to happen during introduction. So the staff presentation could happen during public comment. The sponsors of the bills may speak when it's first introduced. So that's something that when and if we would revise these, that would be a good thing to address, is that discrepancy. Let's see. This is where next we have some additional rules on other orders of business, including where petitions from the floor limitations come from. So the governing body does have a limitation on seating of time. There are some committees in the city who allow seating of time by the public. The governing body's meeting rules do not provide for that. And I would think one example is the Planning Commission does often allow for neighbors to cede time. And this rule does not apply to our other committees, so that's fine. If they have that freedom within their rules, if they would like to do that, they can do that. But we do not have that discretion. And it's also important, the public, when they're doing petitions from the floor, that also is not a dialogue. And part of the reason is because they can also speak about any topic they want, and it might not be on the agenda. So that would also be an Open Meetings Act problem if we were to begin to engage in a dialogue with folks during petitions from the floor. Let's see. We talked a little bit about public hearings during the Open Meetings Act training. Another section that's important to know very well is the rules of debate, which starts on page 17. The order of speakers is also important because that does differ from the Roberts rules a little bit. Presiding officer generally recognizes council or members in the order that they request the floor, except that the member who made the motion is entitled to be recognized first, and only one person may have the floor at a time. And then in addition to that, it would generally be if someone hasn't spoken yet, then they would generally get the opportunity first. Interruption of a speaker would generally be for a point of order. If someone thinks that a rule is being violated, and we'll get to that a little bit more specifically here. Also a request for inquiry for information, so a point of information. If something isn't just not following, like someone's quoting something and you don't know where it's from, that could be a point of information, what document is being quoted right now, that type of thing, something that needs to be addressed for you to be able to understand what's being discussed. If someone just starts reading from a document or something like that, I think a point of personal information or a point of inquiry would be appropriate then to interrupt the speaker. So it's not very often, but those are two very good examples for when an interruption would make sense. And then the rules do provide that a member may speak more than once to the same motion, only when all the counselors desiring to speak have spoken. So that's something to keep in mind. I think we're going to get an example of this today, but recusal from a meeting, our rules do provide that if a counselor needs to recuse themselves, they will leave the room during the discussion of that matter and then come back afterwards. If anyone ever has a question about recusal, my office is happy to discuss whether or not you need to, and there might be times where you don't need to, but you still wish to do so. To avoid an appearance of a conflict, even if there might not be an actual conflict. Let's see. So then we've got some rules about the motion and debate. So you will notice that the motions available for action items are a little bit different for governing body versus the council committees. So that's good to keep in mind. And those motions are amend, postpone to a certain date, postpone indefinitely, refer to a city council committee, or lay on the table. Again, lay on the table just delays discussion. It does not postpone it to a different meeting. So the idea is that if you need to come back to an item during the same meeting, you would lay it on the table. Before discussion begins, this is another distinction between standing committees and governing body, is standing committees have a specific recognition that you can start discussing an item before a motion is on the table. And sometimes that is that people don't necessarily know what motion they want to make until they get a few questions answered. Whereas governing body more closely adheres to Robert's rules, which says that you don't discuss an item until there's a motion on the table. If that motion fails, then a different motion may be appropriate if needed. Generally, if the opposite is it just not to pass, then you don't need another motion for something to not pass. So in governing body, if something fails on the initial motion, generally you don't need to make another motion. But there might be times that an amended version of the initial motion will make sense. There are a few other things at page 20 that are important to know about. There's a requirement of advance notice. If you're aware of a matter that's going to have substantial discussion that maybe might not be clear to everyone else, the idea is to let the mayor and the city clerk know in case we need to adjust the agenda. So maybe we're planning on 5 presentations, and you know that there's going to be a huge number of people to support a bill and that it's very contentious. If you can let the presiding officer and the clerk know, we can then maybe adjust the agenda in advance and reprioritize when those presentations are happening, that type of thing. Or if we know there's a contentious land use hearing and you know something else is going to be contentious, it would be nice to have that conversation so we can help to address that in advance. Intentional surprises is another addition to the more recent rules, and that says governing body members will make every effort not to surprise each other and staff by bringing up new information at a meeting. They shall give notice to the presiding officer and city clerk of their intention to bring up new information as soon as practical before the meeting. So that's really helpful for people too. That way, if there's staff who's needed to maybe bring relevant information or to prepare relevant information about something new that has happened since perhaps the last standing committee or since the introduction of legislation that might change everyone's ability to have a productive conversation. That's the type of thing that that's referring to. So if you get like an email from a constituent that says, we're bringing, we have this new information about this policy decision you're making that we want to make sure you have, and you have reason to think maybe no one else has it. That would be the type of thing that would be helpful to have in advance so that we, again, have a productive meeting that everyone can participate in a way that makes sense. Okay, let's see. I think amendment and suspension amendment of these rules, this is on page 21, is another important one. And that requires a 2/3 vote. I think I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I don't think I'm going to go into specific parts of the council committee rules. I was raising, I think, a lot of the differences as I went through the governing body meeting procedural rules, but there's a few things I'll highlight at the end that are additional distinctions. A few of the motions that we may not have spoken about that I just want to highlight. Generally, we need a main motion on the floor in order to have discussions. That's usually a motion to adopt or approve. After that, we would have a motion to amend if there's a change to that main motion that you'd like to use. A point of order is generally used if you do not agree with the way things are proceeding and that they're not compliant with one of these rules that we've discussed today or any of the other ones that are in your local rules. Lay on the table, we've discussed that just delays something during the same meeting. Calling the previous question is an important one to know. Our rules provide that at least everyone's had the opportunity to speak once if they've wanted it before calling the question. It does not have any debate associated with it, so it goes immediately to a vote. It requires a 2/3 vote to pass. And what it does is it brings whatever the matter is that's being discussed to a vote. That can happen sometimes if we're running out of time or if folks feel like things have been already aired, like the conversation has happened and everyone maybe feels like they know where people's positions are. They aren't going to change. It's time for a vote. Move to reconsider. This is one important to know. Someone in the majority of, or someone in the prevailing side of a motion needs to ask for a motion to reconsider, even if the prevailing side is a minority, which is why I just restated that. For example, if you wanted to waive the rules and a 2/3 majority is needed, and you were in the majority, but it was only a simple majority, and then you think you have a bigger majority and you want a motion to reconsider, or you realize that more information has come to light of why we need the motion to waive the rules, something like that. A motion to reconsider would be appropriate. And it's only during the same meeting that the item came up. So that's another thing to be aware of. There are other proceedings to go through if you want to undo something that happened at a prior meeting. But motion to reconsider is only for something that was voted on at that meeting. Let's see, limit or extend limit on debate. So this is something that hasn't been utilized with this body very often, but it is possible. Robert's Rules does have a general limit on debate, but it doesn't apply to legislative bodies. So for legislative bodies, the exception says it's pursuant to local rule. So our local rules don't have any limitations on speaking other than for petitions from the floor and things like that. But for governing body members, our rules don't address that. That doesn't mean you couldn't address it by a motion on a particular matter or for a particular meeting. And so that would be you could either limit debate on an item to a total number of time, like 30 minutes on a particular item, or it could be a number of minutes per person, or it could be a number of speaking times per person. It could be cumulative, it could be per speaking time. So all of those are possible. They're not things that we've utilized to this recent in the last few years, but they are definitely possible. Commit or refer, we've spoken about that a little bit. That's if we wanted to send something to a particular committee for review or for a particular answer about a question. Postpone to a certain date. The governing body did that for this presentation. And it could be with a date associated with it, or it could be to after something happens. For example, once we know X information, we will schedule it at that point. Postpone indefinitely, basically just take something off your action items forever. That also hasn't been used very often, but it is a possible motion and it's recognized in your local rules as well. So this is just a brief awareness that there's these ideas of whether something's a main motion, whether it's a subsidiary motion, whether it's subject to debate, what kind of vote is required, and whether or not the motion is in order. So these are the types of things that your parliamentarian and I might have to look at if something is a very complex request, suggestion, or motion. But the main idea is that main motion has to be made before a subsidiary motion. Generally, something like a motion to amend is a subsidiary motion. There's other ones that are subsidiary, like calling the question. You need a question on the table before you can call the question. So then there's the question of whether it's subject to debate. That means, can we talk about it? And then the type of vote required, is it a majority? Is it a supermajority? Is it everyone? And then you have to look at whether or not the motion is in order at that time. And that means, is it proper at that time? those are the questions that a parliamentarian looks at. These are the types of things I look at if we're looking at a legal recommendation procedurally. This is an example of one of the tables in Robert's Rules that categorizes motions. And they are in order of priority. The ones on the top are the highest priority. The ones on the bottom are the lowest. You'll notice that main motion has the lowest priority of these categories. And so this is just to give a flavor. If anyone has an example they want to work through on a case by case basis, feel free to give me a call if you're worried something's going to happen or if there's something you think should happen in order to make a proceeding occur in an orderly fashion. This is the type of thing we might have to look at. And then this is another example of one of the charts in Robert's Rules that's compiles a lot of information. There's many pages of this where it goes through each type of motion and what kind of motion it is. M is main motion, P is, I think, a privileged motion, and S, if there's any S's, yes, are subsidiary motions. So this is just to give some flavor. I didn't want to go through those in detail, but just to give some idea. The Robert's Rules book, ideally, we're just using our local rules to the greatest extent possible because that adds simplicity to things. But to the extent we need them, we would refer to Robert's Rules. Then I just wanted to give a little overview on voting. Motions are generally adopted with a simple majority. Some require a supermajority. I apologize. This slide's a little bit goofy. Proxy votes are not allowed. Tie votes fail. And that's for both in committee and for governing body. And there's the votes which are in favor, opposed, abstain. And so abstentions generally count as a no. In committee for everything, they count as a no. In governing body for legislation, they count as a no. And in the governing body, they count with the majority for matters other than legislation. It doesn't count if there's a tie and the motion fails. So recusal is not included as a vote at all. It's just basically the committee's or the governing body's numbers decrease for that vote. So you only look at the people who are still in the room. I think that's everything on there. So I do think it's important to know the distinctions there between committee and governing body. Particularly since something has to pass at least one committee to get on the governing body agenda. So even if you don't have a unanimous vote against something at committee, if no committees pass it, then it also doesn't make it to the agenda, right? So it might, if one committee doesn't pass an item, basically, has a majority vote to deny, another committee has a majority vote to pass, then it will be on the discussion agenda, or that's where it should be. So it still makes it to the agenda, but just on discussion. Whereas if no committee has a majority vote in support of an item, it doesn't go to the governing body at all unless we waive rules. So there could be a situation where the city manager makes a determination, this is something that really needs to come to a vote, but you would have to waive your rules to vote on it. And that's what I've prepared. Are there any questions or discussions?
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. Very comprehensive. And I do appreciate the opportunity for follow-up with you if people have questions after tonight that didn't occur in the moment. Councilor Cassett.
Thank you so much. And thank you, City Attorney, for this wonderful overview. I had a quick couple of questions. Looking at votes within a committee, if there is a recusal that means you lose your quorum, I am assuming that you then can't take action. Would that be correct?
Mayor Weber, Councilor Cassett, that's a great question. So in conflicts of interest, and maybe I'll ask Marcos if he could highlight this during our ethics proceeding, because for the conflicts of interest, there's some exceptions that says if it won't allow you to vote on an item, if you were to recuse yourself, then it creates an opportunity for a further evaluation of that question as to whether you could participate. Okay. So that's maybe slightly different answer than what you're going for. But if you still had to recuse yourself, then yes, I agree. You probably couldn't take action. So then we'd have to look at what the matter is. If it was something that was legally required, we might try to put it on a governing body meeting anyway.
Mhm.
And either you'd have to waive your rules if it was legally required for you to consider, but still discretionary. But if it was really something that actually was legally required, that might override your rules, right?
Right.
And can't think of all the possibilities that might be out there. But I
Yeah.
think to your initial question, that would be
Most
the
likely,
general
yes.
situation, yeah.
And then if we had said, this is the committee schedule, and say, at quality of life, there's a recusal, there's only two of us left. Does that mean that it would return to quality of life so that it continues to be considered by the committees, or would it? I mean, we didn't contemplate this. We contemplated every single scenario. We missed one. What do you know?
Mayor Councilor Cassett, actually, I think there's a few scenarios we might not have contemplated. And this happens, so we would have to try to find the best way for that to happen. I think it would probably go to the next committee when it was scheduled. We might need to look at whether or not we want to get another vote of the governing body. Is it even possible to ever have a quorum? Is the recusal such that, are there multiple recusals? Are you never going to have a ability to pass this out of a committee? If that's the case, you've got this impossibility situation. So we would look at it. But I think your initial question, and my initial answer that yes, you would have a problem there in terms of passing it.
Mhm.
That would be the
Voting.
general, but then we might have to look at what is the item we're actually talking about here. And then
Go from there.
go from there. Because our rules don't contemplate everything. They don't. They attempt to serve the purposes stated. But there have been a few, I have some annotations for the next round.
I'm sure we do. And then my other one is in the motion to reconsider. What is the time limit for that? I mean, if you think about a vote that we took months ago, could somebody in the majority ask to reconsider, or does it have to be within the time frame of that meeting, or when, the legislation is enacted? Where is the limitations there?
Mayor and Councilor Cassett. So for reconsider specifically, it is the same meeting. And then whether or not something can be brought back after a meeting, it depends on what it is. And then there's various rules on that.
Okay,
So
but for that
Yeah.
specific motion, has to be within the time frame of that.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, it has to be at the same meeting, and it has to be, and that one is a main motion. So it would have to be unless it was about a subsidiary motion that you're reconsidering, for example, to amend.
Mhm.
You were going to reconsider a vote to amend. Then you could make it when there's not another motion to amend on the table, but the main motion's on the table. So yes, basically during the same meeting, unless it's something that can't be undone. For example, you've tabled something. And then you've already taken it up. You can't reconsider the original motion to table because you've already taken up the thing again. I mean, that's a silly example, but that that one has an impossibility exception too.
Okay,
So if it's yep.
yeah, something can be done. Okay, those were my two questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have,
Okay. Yeah, I think the opportunity to go back through this when you have time and add questions later is an open invitation. Yes, Councilor Merriworth.
Just quickly, the motion to postpone indefinitely, that could in essence stop a bill, correct? I thought we didn't have that.
Mayor, Councilor, we did recognize it in the governing body rules, not in committee rules. So I think it would only be possible in a governing body meeting.
To postpone indefinitely.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Like I said, I think the opportunity to follow up, if there's something you want to bring up privately with the city attorney, that's always fair game, rather than doing it in a full meeting and then bring it back for consideration at another time. Thank you very much. And I think it is an ongoing effort to make the rules work for everybody and to create a process that really is fair and open and allows for a good public meeting. With that, Madam Clerk, could we go to the next item, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the next item is item 9N. It was pulled by Counselor Michael Garcia. It's a request for approval of a professional services agreement between Indigo Sports LLC for operating services at the Marty Sanchez Links de Santa Fe Golf Course for a total amount not to exceed $11,543,515 through January 31st, 2028, and a request for approval of a budget amendment resolution in the amount of $1,602,000 from lodgers tax revenues balance to fund the professional services agreement with Indigo Sports LLC to operate the Marty Sanchez Links de Santa Fe Golf Course through June 30th, 2024. We have Golf Course and Sports Complex Manager Jonathan Weiss and the Parks and Open Space Division Director Melissa McDonald for questions.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion and then we'll get a presentation and then Counselor Garcia can ask questions and open up the discussion.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second. Let's go to presentation so everyone has the benefit of knowing this item more completely, and then Counselor Garcia can begin after that. You have the floor, sir.
Mayor Weber, Mayor Weber, esteemed councilors, my name is Jonathan Weiss, and I'm, as she said, the golf course and sports complex manager with the city of Santa Fe, and it is my pleasure to present the contract for approval, which came from an RFP for golf course management services. It's released in April of 2023. And we received 3 proposals, of which the selection committee selected Troon Golf, their subsidiary called Indigo Sports. And this is a world-renowned golf course management company, and they will create a full-service golf course that we focused on our local patrons. Locals will receive preferential rates and tee times, access to fundraising opportunities. There'll be at least 10 gratis benefit tournaments for local nonprofit organizations annually. There will also be new training, internship, and mentorship programs for the local community as a result of this new operator. There will also be expanded opportunities for local events at the venue. The professional services agreement, I believe she gave most of the details, but there will be a monthly management fee, which is $8,000 for the 12 months, included in a not to exceed. All revenues for the first time in 25 years in the history of this golf course would flow to the city directly from this contract. Revenue is projected to increase annually from what we have seen in the prior quarter century. The golf course manager will perform walkthroughs with the contractor, who will then address these issues. There would be an annual budget increase from the current budget beginning in FY25 that is estimated at about $800,000. Some additional benefits would be greater perceived value that will justify increases in out-of-state green fees rates. There will be opportunities for destination events at the facility, such as weddings and conferences. The operator's reputation will attract a tourist type to our golf facility, our area hotels and restaurants, whose spend per visit will increase GRT. There will also be reciprocity agreements, the opportunity for reciprocity agreements between Marty Sanchez Links de Santa Fe and Sandia Golf Club, just south of here. This will enhance City of Santa Fe offerings, and we look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Director McDonald, at this time, or just wait for questions?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. I'm very excited about this contract. We've been working on it for a little while, and we feel that this is going to be in the best interest of the city, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. With that then, Counselor Garcia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, staff, for being here for the presentation. During the Finance Committee, some of the committee members went over the 10 community events. It was also established that the counselors, and I believe the mayor as well, has the opportunity to waive the fees at the course. Can we go over that a little bit? Because I want to make sure we're kind of crystal clear, because in regards to how we're going to move forward, because I think that is a benefit that the community has definitely looked forward to in regards to working with the counselors to host these community golf fundraiser events. I mean, you've got folks, I mean, for example, this year I used mine for Keep Santa Fe Beautiful. Year before I used it for the Santa Fe High football team. It's an opportunity for our organizations in our community to really provide a fundraising benefit, but also provide some exposure for our golf course. And so in the contract, can we go through, so in the contract in section on page 5, XVN Community Services, first subsection is A, the facility shall host at least 10 charity golf tournaments annually. And then it goes into section B, the contractor shall allow the city to utilize the facility without fees to host 3 events each year, such as 4Kids and the Santa Fe City Championship. So can we distinguish the differences between hosting the 10 golf charity tournaments and then the 3 that the city will host?
Mayor, councilors, in your original question, you asked, will we be able to waive fees? We always are able to waive fees at the discretion of the counselor and the approval of the city manager, and that is a process in which we perform an opportunity to do that. We also have wanted to keep the 3 charity course nonprofit type. I'm sorry, this is kind of bouncing back, sorry. We wanted to keep that available as it always has been. Adding the 10 courses, we will need to develop a process so that it is in relationship to the goals and values of the city. Very similar to how the convention center might be a way to look at that.
Okay, so I'm still a little confused because we've got the 10 that separate the 2 separate. We've got the 10 charity golf tournaments, but then you've got the 3 that are hosted by the city.
Correct.
And 2 have been identified, such as the 4Kids and Santa Fe Championship. Let's focus on the 10 right now. I'm assuming the potential waived fees from at least the 8 counselors would come out of that 10.
Yes, it could come out of that 10.
So then there's ultimately, or maybe even 9, if we look at the whole governing body, is the mayor allowed to waive the fees as well? Or I think on Monday during finance, it said the mayor has the opportunity to waive 2 fees. Is that how we came up with the 10? Or
Maybe you can answer that.
We looked historically at how many charity events we hold at the golf course generally. And these are 501c3 organizations that are looking to fundraise. And it says at least 10. So we wanted to make sure to maintain those charitable events and have the opportunity to grow them.
okay, so if I'm taking into consideration and let's just say the governing body, that's 9, all of the governing body members utilize this opportunity to sponsor the course for one event. That leaves 1, and it was explained that there's going to be a process to select the 1. I mean, that's a bit concerned in regards to how we're going to identify the 1 that's left over or 2 that's left over if a counselor doesn't decide it. I mean, I think we can get ourselves in a very strange predicament, or we can have some organizations maybe upset saying, hey, I want to participate in this. How do I do this? And And so, and right now, we're focusing on the 10 and then we'll get to the 3 next.
I would say excuse me, Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia, the 10 is a minimum. So we wouldn't have to restrict the amount of these charitable events. We just want to make sure there are at least 10 available. If more come forward, there are many opportunities, and I think the operator would act in the best financial interest of the city. And if a process needs to be put in place, we certainly would look at putting that process in place if we come to a pinch point where there are more applicants than there are spaces. We would need to come to a process, yeah.
Mayor, councilors, there is a process. The current process is if somebody wants to waive a fee, they need to come to the golf course manager, we write a memo, and then the city manager approves. It goes up to the city manager. Sometimes, if they're trying to waive all the fees, we then come to the council. So there already is a process, but we did discuss with the convention, Randy Randall in the Convention Center, that we may want to look at that process. So every year, we'll be putting together an annual plan, and that's an opportunity for us to look at that. But the current process is that we have to put forward a memo. And so it does have to be reviewed, depending on the amount, either through the city manager or this body. So that's the current process.
And then
I just wasn't quite understanding. Does that answer the question?
it does.
Yeah.
I think, I think we want to make sure we have a process in place as quick as possible. Just that way, the public is well aware of how they can utilize this benefit that is available to any nonprofit, whether it be the organizations I mentioned or anybody else that feels they can utilize the use of the course as a fundraising opportunity for their organization. And so I guess the follow-up question to that is, once this process is established, is that done through internal policy? Will that come back before the governing body for ratification? What does the next step in that process look like for the approval of, for the process that allows for these 10 or maybe more uses to be approved?
Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia, as I said, there is a process. The process is that it goes through the city manager via memo, but I might defer to legal as to changing policy. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you could give me a little guidance on that.
Mayor Weber, councilors, Director McDonald, I think one of the layers that's hasn't been delved into here, but also any of these requests has to go through a evaluation of anti-donation. So it just depends on who they are, what the purpose of the fundraiser is, and all of that. So not all nonprofits would probably qualify. So we'd have to look at that overarching situation. And if a different process than what's being described was desired, then I think that would be the way that policy is proposed, which was just a resolution. So if the resolution as it stands now doesn't have the steps that are desired, then it could be updated.
Okay, so am I understanding correctly that a process could be or would need to go through resolution? Or I mean, I just want to make sure, given that this is a contract, that we understand who then will become responsible for this process. Because are we going to get into a situation where the contractor says, City of Santa Fe, you're responsible for developing this process, or it's vice versa? So I think I just want to make sure we're establishing who is ultimately going to develop and establish this process should this contract be approved. Because I think my ultimate goal is to ensure that the public understands how we're going to move forward with the request to utilize any of these 10 slots.
Mayor Weber and Councilor Garcia, they're in the code. This is outlined as I've described it. I just am forgetting the code, the number, but it is in the fee section of the code that the process is that it has to go through the city manager. So I would believe that we would have to work with our legal department to change the city code. And I'm wondering if that's the correct answer. So I'm going to defer to the city attorney, but in general, if we exceed that threshold per event, we would need to come to the governing body. So that's the only answer that I have to give to you, but
Right. No,
we do have
understand.
the process and it is a code.
Okay. And not to say we're going to get into this predicament, but you know, I always am somebody who plans 2-3 steps ahead in the sense of if, you know, 3 years from now, the contractor says, hey, we've only got these 10 slots and we've awarded them to these other 10 organizations, but you've got 4 counselors who still want to utilize their sponsorship. And the contractor says, nope, it says a minimum of 10. We've hit that threshold. The other 4, again, it's contingency planning. And I think it all comes back to the process in place and making sure everybody is aware of who is responsible for what. Because as I mentioned, the counselors or the governing body itself could gobble up 9 of these slots. And so I want to make sure that whenever we hand off this baton potentially to a contractor, we set them up for success and not in a situation where we're trying to figure out what is the process for the sponsorship, how do we keep track of the number of counselors that have requested sponsorship, et cetera. And I think just ultimately trying to figure that out, but it sounds like we're in the works of it. So with that, let's go and move on to the next 3. The contractor shall allow the city to utilize the facility without fees to host 3 events each year. And so who selects those 3 events?
Those 3 events are, Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia. Those 3 events, 2 events historically have been hosted by the city. And we wanted to allow for an additional event that would be hosted by the city. That additional event would go through the same process that the first 2 did to become city-sponsored events.
Okay. So I think given that we're going to be outsourcing this process, it's imperative that we begin to establish some parameters. That way the public is well aware of the process and the timelines that would be needed to be requesting these sponsorships. Because we wanted to make it a fair and equitable process. So for example, you know, I know some entities will say January 1 at 12:01 a.m., we're going to begin to take requests, first come, first serve. And that's how the spots are allocated. Or there could be a formal RFP process to say, we are going to work, you know, the first couple months to allocate, because we're not going to necessarily, most folks aren't going to host a golf tournament now in January. And so we can say January 1 through, we're going to accept RFPs for this, and then we'll allocate it for that remainder of that calendar year. So I just want to ensure that we're moving forward with a fair and equitable process, given that some of these slots, I mean, especially the 10 that the counselors usually use, and I think community organizations really begin to benefit. I mean, benefit and look to use that as their fundraising opportunity for the year. And we want to ensure that everybody is well aware of that process, that because I'm not saying it's changing because I haven't seen the full process, but there is wiggle room for that. If it's not written down for the contractor to say, here's the process, this is what you asked me to follow. I want to make sure that there is that opportunity. And if it is not going to, the sponsorship is not going to be afforded to the governing body, we need to make sure that we're alerting the public to that as well. Given that these are, I believe it was in an ordinance. If we didn't get, I think we got it during our orientation, the sponsorship ordinance. So just want to make sure we've got that process figured out. So if as it moves forward and as it's established, I would ask that at least be brought to the governing body's attention. That way, if there's any changes, we can plan and prepare accordingly. The next question I have is around staff. How many staff currently, how many City of Santa Fe employees currently work at the golf course?
Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia, we currently have 10 staff positions, and we will be moving 4 of those positions over to Parks and Public Works to fill vacancies in this plan.
So we've got 10 staff, 4 are being reclassified to a different, can you? explain?
Reassigned back to Parks. Currently, the MRC is under Parks, and the 4 are going to be moving over to Parks, or 3 are moving to Parks, and 1 may move over to Public Works.
So those 4 staff, they're being reassigned. What do they have the opportunity for a say in the matter, or here's your reassignment orders, and if you don't agree to them, unfortunately, we're going to have to separate ourselves.
Mayor Weber, councilors, we have spoken with staff, and staff is aware of our changes, and all the staff seems happy with their assignments.
Okay, so those are 4 folks. The other 6 positions,
Mayor Weber and councilor, the other 6 positions will be assigned to the MRC because we usually fill those positions with temp employees during the busier times, and there is a need to fill those positions. So we're just filling slots that are vacant. We have quite a few vacancies, so it's not too difficult for Parks to absorb these folks. We did do a significant amount of work with the individuals to make sure that they're placed where they want to be. We also made them aware that they would have an opportunity to apply for jobs through the contractor, and the contractor will be reaching out should this be approved to let those employees know that they would highly value their expertise if they want to stay with the contractor.
okay. And just to clarify, the 10 employees that are currently working for the golf course, they will continue to be employed by the City of Santa Fe.
Correct.
And then, because I was looking through the organizational chart that's part of the packet, and it's, I'm assuming the golf course sports complex manager would not be part of this. Am I understanding that correctly? Because
That is correct. The golf course manager position will stay in place. Many of these positions are vacant right now, actually. So this is a good thing for us to be having an operationer come in that can fill these positions. It's a challenging job market. And so we're excited about that. We have places to absorb people, but the current operational structure does allow for us to maintain the golf course manager position.
so the golf course.
Actually, it's a MRC golf course manager position, it's a sports complex position. So it's both sides of the field. It's the golf course and the MRC athletic fields.
Right, that's the position Mr. Weiss is in correctly. Yeah, right. And so then the other positions that, looking at this chart, which is 7 or 8 other positions plus 7 seasonal workers, so that's 15 positions I'm seeing in this chart. You outlined 10 of them. What happens with that? Because and I don't know how you had the breakdown of the 10 folks, but there is the golf course superintendent, marketing and special events coordinator, irrigation superintendent, golf course mechanic, account technician, and then you've got parks maintenance worker, parks maintenance worker, parks maintenance worker. Those are all identified positions, and then you have 7 seasonal position workers. So by my count, that is 15 positions.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia, we have these positions available, temporary positions available. They are not always filled. Those are positions that are available should we need them. It's actually very difficult to fill those positions, the temporary positions. So in the most recent times, we've had to have contracts would bring in temporary employees because it's the 6 months that it's kind of determined doesn't really work in the way that it as well at the golf course anymore.
Right, and I understand they may not be filled, but I guess my question is, are they budgeted for? And if they are budgeted for, then what happens to the remainder of those positions? Because then those are resources that
Yeah.
are ultimately not going to fill, given that you have a contractor coming in to and continue the duties of the work of these employees.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia, we use temporary employees in both parks and at the MRC. So often those positions can be utilized in either, okay? So we need temporary employees. We need workers in these levels. So while they're funded, they're not filled because we need to get more workers in there at the moment. Then it's going from 10, is it 10 to 3? So those positions we can remove from the budget if we're asked to. However, we haven't really utilized those, and we're not utilizing those funds because they're not filled. Those positions are available to both parks and to the MRC. Does that answer your question, Counselor?
It does in some sense. I think what I'm ultimately trying to understand is these positions that have been allocated through the budget,
Mhm.
how are we going to move forward with them potentially in the next year's budget or the preceding 5 years? I definitely understand that there is need. I mean, there's need throughout the entire city. I mean, outside of the MRC complex, I think, yes, many of our community members, our parks are in dire need. And if we can move some of those seasonal worker positions to help maintain some of our other parks, that would be great. And I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to figure out. What are we doing with the position, the resources allocated to these positions? That way we can figure out how we can best continue to support, whether it be MRC, the golf course, or any other park throughout the city.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Garcia, so the MRC budget will shift because we now have a contract that's taking over different responsibilities. So when we do our budget this year, that budget will reflect the contract. And those positions will essentially become unfunded positions unless I ask for them. We will potentially need a few temporary positions at the MRC, but because the positions are empty that we're moving toward the MRC. So those unfunded positions would be captured during our budget process. But again, these positions are positions that while we have the position, they may not be funded. So we have to request for that funding at budget time.
But they're funded currently.
Currently, they are funded.
Okay, so
But
we've got
at the budget time, they may or may not be funded depending on what the vote on the budget is.
right, but
Yeah.
that means we've got unused funds currently because these positions haven't been filled.
Mayor, Councilor Garcia, that is correct. We have salary savings. We have salary savings that we don't utilize if we're not funding the position. So if we're advertising positions and they don't fill, that money is called salary savings, and that is available now. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I think you helped me understand the use of the course in regards to the sponsorships and then regards to the employees. I wanted to make sure that the folks that are currently staffing the golf course have all opportunity to retain their employment with the city of Santa Fe. I would hope that the contractor can provide local preference in regards to hiring for employees, whether it be golf course maintenance, because from my understanding, they're also taking over the restaurant and store and everything. I know we've got some highly talented folks in our community that might want to be employed by the new contractors at the golf course. So I know it's not part of this contract to have a local preference, but if we can encourage them to hire locally, I think that would show some support for our community. So wish you all the best, and got no other questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Castro.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Director, I'll try to be brief. I do have a couple suggestions, being that we had both in finance and at the governing body some questions about the process. We might consider developing a little bit more of a robust process. And I think that under city obligations, section M, it sort of gives us the ability to talk to Indigo about its labor practices if they aren't sort of maintaining the city standard of labor practices, because we are overseeing standards of operation and quality of service. So if we could use that as a way to make sure that the employers or that we are contracting with are good employers, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Mayor Worth.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Weiss and Ms. McDonald for being here again. We had a great conversation with you all on Monday night at the Finance Committee. And I think this item passed on consent at Public Works, Public Utilities the week prior. So I did appreciate you being at Finance Monday night and answering our questions. I was, there were two things that came up Monday night that since we have probably more people listening, I wanted to emphasize. And I think, Mr. Weiss, you suggested that, you reported to us that the revenues from the course will now flow to the city. And at Finance, you predicted or suggested that the model shows that the course could be solvent at the end of this 4-year contract. And maybe could you just, am I correct in what I heard at Finance? And could you just speak to that? Because I think that's actually kind of exciting news.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Romero Worth, thank you for bringing that point to the public's attention. Yes, the projections that were given to us by Troon Golf in their proposal in response to our RFP showed their projections were that the golf course would be solvent by the end of the contract, which is a 4-year contract.
Great. And another thing we talked about at Finance was the provision, and I probably should have found it, around water conservation. Could you just again speak to that? I think it's an important piece of this that I would like, again, for the community to understand.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Romero Worth, the golf course has prioritized the value of water in the operation of the golf course. That's demonstrated by putting forward a turf reduction plan over the last year. It did not yet get funded, but we have placed in the contract a statement reflecting our desire that water and the value of water is prioritized in the operation of the golf course.
Great. And I did just find the language, which is on page, I can't read this, 5 or 6, where it says in the program development, develop best practices toward water conservation that recognizes the value of water in our region. And I just think this is one of one of a number of places where I think this contract is aligning with the community's values. Certainly, we've talked about already benefits to locals and making sure that that isn't lost as we market to wider constituencies and utilize the value of this course among tourists. We're not going to lose anything for locals' ability to play at this course. And you mentioned that in your presentation. Then the second piece here, of course, is water. And then third, the questions around our employees and their ability to apply for some of these jobs, and then also the work you've done in helping the folks who currently work there, if they're not going to work for this new contractor, making sure that they're appropriately placed and happy with their placement. So I think there are a number of places where this contract has been, I think I described it, Finance, thoughtfully put together to emphasize our values and align with the community's values. So I appreciate that. Just want to point out one more thing. You mentioned that Troon courses have a loyalty program. And so locals who play the course regularly, when they travel, will be able to benefit from a loyalty points kind of process to play other places. Can you speak to that briefly? I thought that was kind of exciting as well.
Mayor Weber, Councilor Romero Worth, that is correct. One of the many benefits for bringing this Troon Golf to our community is that community members who spend their hard-earned dollars at Marty Sanchez Links de Santa Fe will be rewarded with points that they can use anywhere else in the world at Troon golf courses, so they'll be rewarded here when they're staying at home, and they'll also be rewarded when they want to hit the road.
And I think you mentioned 800 courses worldwide. Is that correct? That Troon?
Yes, more than 825 golf courses, so they definitely have a very high level of expertise and they're best in class.
Right, and lots of opportunity as community members find themselves potentially traveling to other places where they'll benefit from the loyalty program and their local play here. So I think that's kind of exciting. Anyway, thanks again for being here and for answering our questions. Really appreciate it. This is a big contract. It is a big step for the city, and appreciate all the work. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Faulkner.
So I have a question related to water usage. Who's responsible for the cost of the water that's being used?
Mayor Weber, councilors, the cost of the water would be paid by the city. Several months ago, we did pass a rate structure that we operate under, and right now it's about $1 million a year.
And then I just want to reiterate that we make sure that this facility stays available for the community members. I think we all feel that way. And when I read through the portions of the contract, there seems to be things in there that are good stopgaps and some checks and balances. But I just want to be mindful that we make sure that we enforce this as a city if we see things starting to slip in one direction or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else? Counselor Lindell.
I'll be brief. Thank you. I know this contract has been a huge amount of work. And we have a city asset that through a company here that manages hundreds and hundreds of golf courses. It's a real gem. It's a best in class. I look forward to seeing how we can meet all the potential of the golf course. And I see Mr. Randall here also. I'm looking forward to us putting together promoting tourism with play and stay packages. I know that this is a very, very highly thought of company if you participate in the world of golf, which I do. And people travel around to play these golf courses, and they're not going to be disappointed in ours. I can tell you that. We have a lot of opportunity here with this, and I'm really proud of this team, the amount of effort that they put into this. You brought us a really, really good product. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Others? I want to echo what Counselor Lindell just said. I think most folks don't realize just how much work went in first to maintaining and running the course when the operator who had been with us for quite a while decided they didn't want to do it any longer. You all stepped up and took it on, and you did it with an enormous amount of diligence and grace and concern for the community and for the frequent golfers who are really devoted to the course. You made them feel welcome and appreciated, and you accommodated their needs, recognizing that it was a transitional effort until we got to a process that has brought us to where we are tonight. I think that shouldn't go unrecognized. Just that effort to keep the course going, meeting standards, meeting people's expectations is something that really deserves an enormous amount of gratitude and recognition. I also want to point out what Councilor Lindell just acknowledged, which is that this proposal is actually only possible because of the collaboration between tourism and recreation and parks, that it's really a cross-departmental success story to recognize that a facility like this serves a multitude of purposes, including first and foremost our own golf community here in town, and also a broader group of people who are devoted to the sport of golf. You really have packaged something together that represents a best-in-class contract, a best-in-class offer, a very carefully tailored proposal so that our interests are not only protected, but advanced. The city is well served by this effort, and you all put it together working as a team, and that teamwork is really exceptional and really important to say thank you for that as well. It is a gem of a course, and you don't have to be a golfer to go there and appreciate the beauty of it and the location, the history, the connections to our community, the deep roots that it has, and the uniqueness of it. Some point you can explain to us what's different about a links course from any other kind of a golf course, because I think it's important. That's in the name. And we ought to acknowledge that we've got something that stands up to the best in the world. And this contract, I think, managed to the specifications in it and overseen with great care, is going to serve our community very well in more than economic interests, also in recreation and fun, in growing the young golfers in town and letting them have a chance to learn how to play and to enjoy the beauty of Marty Sanchez links to Santa Fe. So I think it's important for the whole effort to be acknowledged. It's not just the contract, it's all the work that led to this and the transitional work to keep it going while we were a little bit under duress, and you guys did a great job. So thank you for that. Other questions or comments? There is a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Travis,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for your great work in bringing this forward and keeping the course looking so good and running so well. Madam Clerk, the next item that was taken off of consent, please.
Yes, Mayor, that is item 9O. This was pulled by Counselor Michael Garcia to recuse himself. It's a request for approval of fiscal year 2024 Corporation for National and Community Services Grant Agreement in the total amount of $37,500 for retired senior volunteer programs through March 31st, 2024.
Counselor Garcia, you probably want to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to recuse myself from this item as I work for the federal agency that administers these volunteer programs.
Thank you, Counselor. We'll give you a second to step out, but I don't think it'll. All right, as Counselor Garcia steps outside, can I get a motion on
Move
this
to
item?
approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve and a tie for second. Madam Clerk, you want to choose whoever you heard first. It's okay with me. Is there any discussion on this item? We have a motion. We have a second. Could you please call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Travis,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. Maybe we can let Counselor Garcia know that his presence is welcome. And if you could, Madam Clerk, take us to the next item then, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the next item was moved to discussion. So this is a request for approval to change the administrative manager for the city manager's office to an exempt at-will position from a classified position.
Okay, and what I'll do is ask for a motion and then we'll entertain a discussion and go from there.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and we have a second. Mr. Blair, do you want to walk us through this, please?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Welcome to our new councilors. This was considered to be a minor thing, and I apologize that we accidentally put it on the consent calendar. I hadn't realized that. Last year during the budget process, you all approved funding for a position for an administrative assistant to help the deputy city manager and myself. In our attempt, we created an administrative manager position to give the job a little more oomph, to be expecting that the person would do a little bit more work, boost the salary a little bit. And we've had difficulty finding candidates who are interested in serving in that role. So there's some things we're going to do that don't require governing body approval, but the one that does is changing what would be considered a classified position into an exempt at-will position. We were given guidance that we needed to come before you to make sure you knew we were doing this and to get your blessing that we're doing it. It is common across government that administrative support staff that work for executive leadership are also at will. My view, frankly, would be that when we get to the point that we start looking at hiring staff for you all as governing body members, that those positions would likely also be at will, so that you don't be given a position that you didn't hire and that person may or may not like you and you feel like you're stuck with that sort of a thing. You know, the sort of things that come through my office require a different degree of discretion, some privacy, someone who understands what should or shouldn't be shared outside of the office. And to that extent, having an at-will position provides some additional accountability around that. And so there's not any change to the financial for the finances for the position. That's why there's no FIR. It's just approving that it becomes an exempt at-will position. And I was not actually supposed to be presenting tonight, but my colleague is homesick. So I apologize for the brief presentation, but I'm happy to stand for any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions for the city manager? Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does this require a resolution, given that it's the will of the governing body? I know in the past when we've tried to bring forward any personnel decisions or recommendations, we were told we had to have a resolution. So I'm wondering why this would be any different.
Mayor, Councilor Garcia, so this is a management request and management doesn't write resolutions.
Okay, so it's still asked, what we were told is that if there was something that required the vote of the governing body, it would require a resolution.
Mayor, councilors, if it's a councilor initiative, it requires a resolution. There are many things brought without resolutions, like contracts, budget amendments that the manager brings without a resolution. So management decisions are not brought by resolution because the manager is not legislative. Legislative requests are brought by resolution.
Then, so follow up to that is, should, you know, Mr. Blair hit the lottery and say, I'm out of here, and the next person that comes in says, I want this classified, would the same process be followed?
Mayor, councilors, there's not a requirement to place employees under your rules. So classified positions follow your rules. Exempt positions are exempt from a number of your rules. So I think that's the logic of requiring permission to exempt a position, because it exempts them from some of your rules.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking, I'm just thinking about sustainability in the sense, because there might be an instance where we want somebody to stay on board with the change of administration just because it helps to have that institutional knowledge. You know, for example, we used to, when I came on board, we had the executive assistant that helped on board us, get us our keys, our parking passes, et cetera. There's not that capacity right now. And so I think it's good to have that capacity as there is a potential change in administration. That way, those duties can continue to be conducted. And so not to say that an incoming administration would immediately say, well, sorry, we're going to let you go. But I think there are some positions where it's good to have that sustainability, especially in executive management. And so that was the reason for the question. If it was to revert back, would it need to come back for city council approval? That was the justification for the question. So without no other questions, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Other questions? Yes, Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate that dialogue there. I didn't pull this, but I see the reasoning for it. I think we have some feedback there. I too have a little bit of a concern because I know that what would consist of why does this not follow the same rule again? I think you mentioned legislative, the will of the governing body. City Attorney McSherry.
Mayor, councilors, if a counselor wished to make this type of a change, I think a resolution would be appropriate because that's how counselors take action in front of the governing body. This is a management request by the city manager. And he does not bring resolutions and he does not need a sponsor to make this request.
Thank you. So it seems to me as if we are obviously, this is a decision of the governing body and must be approved by the governing body. It's a request from the manager. Does seem to me just what I, feel is that if it's going to be a change and it's the will of the governing body, that it should have been brought forth in a resolution or at least been able to have a little bit more discussion over this. Those are my comments. I see the reasoning for it, but I'm kind of not really in favor of the way that it's been being presented. So thank you very much for bringing it. And I don't have any other comments.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other Yes. Go ahead, Counselor Castro.
Thank you so much. City Manager Blair, are there other positions, comparable positions at the city there at will at the moment? I know you gave the example of our possible staff, but are there any at the moment?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Castro, I don't know exactly. We can compile a list for you. I know that there are a number of other exempt at-will employees. I'm an exempt at-will employee. My position took the appointment of the mayor, approval of the governing body. The mayor could not like my tie and tell me I'm fired and go home and that's it, right? And so I don't know what other administrative positions are exempt at will at the city, but we can pull a list for you, work with the HR director and get that for you.
No, this is something that is pretty generally accepted at HR and everybody knows how to deal with this.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Other questions? We have a motion. We have a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on this item?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you very much. I'm keeping my eye on the clock because we're tiptoeing up to 7 PM. And if I'm going to, at that time, entertain a motion to change our order of business, but we do have perhaps a couple more things we can make our way through before we get to that, Madam Clerk, if you'll take us to the next item.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The next item is 10A. It's a request for ratification of amendment number 1 to item 23-0132 with New Mexico Department of Transportation to increase the compensation by $275,000 for a new total contract amount of $1,056,560.15 and to extend the term through December 31st, 2025. And also a request for the approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the total amount of $275,000 using $234,960 of NMDOT funding and $40,040 road impact fees for the design of the Acequia Trail project. And we have Capital Projects Manager Romela Glorioso Mas for questions.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion and then we'll take it up.
Move to approve. Second.
Did you get that, Madam Clerk? No. Motion to approve was from Counselor Lindell and the second came from Counselor Cassett. Could you please, thank you. Welcome to our meeting. Nice to see you here. Maybe you could give us and the public who are listening or watching a description of what this request is about.
Thank you, Mayor Weber, councilors. So the city requested the Department of Transportation to amend contract 23-0132 cooperative project agreement to design the Acequia Trail extension from Rufina Street to San Felipe Road. The original contract was for 781,560, which came into effect on May 15, 2023, and was expiring and now expired on December 31st, 2023. So the amendments include additional federal funding of 275,000 and a term extension to December 31, 2025, which is more realistic, unlike the original contract. So since the original contract was expiring on December 31st, 2023, and the governing body were not meeting or was not meeting until today, the staff requested the city manager to accept or approve the amendments via Santa Fe City Code 2-4.6.b, which states that the city manager has the authority to enter agreements seeking or accepting funds of any amount when the deadline to seek or accept the funds occurs before the deadline to include the agreement on the agenda for the governing body's next regularly scheduled meeting. Such agreements shall be subject to ratification by the governing body at the next scheduled meeting for which an agenda has not yet been posted. So I'm here before you. Staff is also requesting to bar the additional design funding of 275,000 using 234,960 NMDOT funding and 40,040 road impact fees. So the $40,040 is the local match, which is 14.56 of the funds. So according to table 80.C of impact fees, capital improvements projects resolution 2022-18, this project is eligible to use up to $3.4 million of road impact fees. So far, we have only used 116,480, which was used to cover local match. So this project will extend the Acequia Trail, which is currently 1.4 miles by 1 mile. This will be multi-use trail, 10 feet wide paved trail to extend access along Acequia Trail, which runs along Acequia Madre, further south to San Felipe Road and connect to the existing El Camino Real Trail north of Agua Fria Road. This project will provide enhanced connectivity along between Acequia Trail, the River Trail, the El Camino Real Trail, and the Terra Contenta Trail via north-south connectors near San Felipe Road. Thank you, and I stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions about this proposed ratification of the amendment? Seeing no hands, I appreciate the thoroughness of your explanation and also the great work you're doing. Could we call the roll, please, Madam Clerk?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner, Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is a couple minutes before 7. I would entertain a motion to change the order of business to go now to petitions from the floor,
So
both
moved.
in the room and on Zoom.
So moved.
There's a motion and there's a second to now go to the petitions from the floor. Then we'll go back to regular order. Is there discussion of that motion? Could you please call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Lindell, Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner, Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. So I think we're close enough to 7 o'clock and I know we've got people here who are eager to speak to the governing body on anything that is not a public hearing. Everybody who wants to will have, including folks on the Zoom, will have an opportunity to speak for 2 minutes, and the city clerk will keep the time, and please respect the amount of time that's allotted. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and esteemed council people. Joe Sheps, 200 Valle del Sol, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Just brought a quick handout to update everybody on.
I think if you're not speaking into the microphone, nobody can hear you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you pass those out, please?
Go ahead, sir.
The front page is from the New Mexican on January 1st. The caricature of the noise issue. Everyone's probably seen that. Second page is equipment that I just took down from the Inn on the Alameda, was on our property. It's a very complex system, but it worked very well. It's being developed by University of New Mexico Engineering Department. It worked fabulously, and it nailed everybody going over the decibel limit. It took a great picture of their license plates, and these cannot issue tickets. However, on the last page, we've been corresponding with the company that the city of New York chose, and who are in conversations now with our city police department. So these systems are operational in New York City, Miami, and Sacramento. It's not the one that we put up just to test the concept. These are secure boxes that cannot be vandalized, that'll be 15 feet up. The question is, where's the money going to come from? And Mayor, I'd love you all to start thinking about that, because they're already in 3 cities. They're up and running. It was proven in London and Paris first. So this is a great product that doesn't take police time, police cars. It'll issue tickets. And all we need to do is convince the municipal courts that, because of the other cities' experiences, that it's a viable, ticketable offense. That's it. Just think about the money, because it's going to cost.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body. My name is James Heath. I'm here to talk about housing. Many of you know I've been opposed to quite a few of the projects that have been brought here and approved. And I've actually been out of the country for a year, so I've kind of lost touch with kind of where we are. But my sense is that it's time to take a hard look at where we are and what we ought to be doing. So I'm going to propose, and probably formally through some process, I'm sure that there's a process, to have the city institute a strict moratorium on all building permits till such time as there is a new, completely revised, approved general plan. And also that there is a new, updated complete water analysis for the state of New Mexico, specifically with respect to this particular region. And so that's something I'm going to work on. I'll put something together. I'll submit it. And hopefully you guys can, you folks can take a hard look at it, and I'll be here next month. And I'll probably be here every month until we get something either done or not.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
My remarks disappeared. So I'll had to wing it. First, I'd like to give,
Need your name, sir.
oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Greg Mello. I'm with the Los Alamos Study Group. Thank you, Mayor Weber and Council for listening to us this evening. I'd like to provide these to the council. There are 10 copies. There's an extra. We're grateful to the leadership from Jamie Cassett and Rene Villarreal and to the mayor for meeting with us to discuss the resolution opposing all plutonium pit production at Los Alamos National Laboratory. We can't think of any circumstance in which this could ever be positive for the city. In fact, we think it's a disaster for the city in process. This handout gives a kind of a précis from several perspectives. Feel free to ask us more about it. We'll be happy to provide that. These were, as you can see, ads in the Santa Fe Reporter. We're perplexed that the city would find it difficult to decide whether it is opposed to a plutonium warhead factory upwind from the city. It might be the only city in the country that would be perplexed about such a thing. There is no possible way in which this could provide economic development. It has not done so far. The proposed resolution, even if it could magically get rid of this new mission, which it won't do, that will rely on citizens and on analysis by the federal government, would not put a single Los Alamos person out of work. And it would make no one feel unwelcome. We are a little perplexed that there is a concern about whether Los Alamos employees would feel welcome in Santa Fe when we know that everyone is welcome in Santa Fe, and a resolution does not address that at all. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Bex Hampton, BEX. I just want to say it's disappointing that the resolution opposing all plutonium pit production at Lanol was pulled. And it's outrageous that it's been done so on the basis that more information is needed to oppose the construction of a plutonium bomb factory. It shouldn't be a difficult decision to make, like who would want to live next to a plutonium bomb factory? And we don't need this plutonium pit production. It permanently contaminates the environment and poisons and kills workers. There's no safe way to build plutonium bomb cores. And we're going to keep mobilizing here and via other avenues to stop this nuclear bomb factory. And we won't allow this plan to move forward. And we're not going to just stand by and allow our state, New Mexico, to become ground zero for waging Congress's suicidal new nuclear arms race that'll really only push us closer to World War III. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Shane Brown. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I volunteer with the Los Alamos Study Group. I'm a bit disappointed in the recent press, the quotes from Mayor Weber and Jamie Cassett and the press themselves, that there was nothing touched on at all about the last line of this resolution, which is opposing Lanol's encroachment into Santa Fe to build any office spaces or laboratory work. It was ironic that the only person who mentioned anything was the labs themselves. Steve Horak, the lab spokesperson, said, "The lab is committed to prioritizing the safety of its workforce and the public and will not be conducting high hazard work outside of Los Alamos." It's kind of a curious PR word salad, to be honest. And it makes me ask the question, are they committed to not doing medium hazard work outside of Los Alamos? What about low hazard work? What are the hazards? Who determines this? Are we to be included, if the resolution is now pulled, in a broader community dialogue, like you suggested? What's to be said of this toxicity and the work that they're suggesting that they are committed to not doing? What's to be said of ACLs, alternate concentration limits, where they petition the EPA to change what the toxicity level is? This is dangerous stuff to be talking about, and I hope it is part of a broader community dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Danielle DeAngelis. I'm a preschool teacher here in Santa Fe and a New Mexico homeowner. I was really disappointed to hear that the resolution opposing PRIT production had been withdrawn. For a moment, I felt hope that our representatives were hearing our calls to push against New Mexico's continuing to be a state making bombs and instead of investing in their citizens and the land. I'm in touch with many families due to my place in early childhood education, and it's not far. It happens often that I hear families leaving New Mexico solely for the reason that they can't ensure their children are receiving quality education, healthcare, and enrichment. This is no surprise as we rank last for child well-being and 49th for economic well-being in the states. It shouldn't be hard to see that the people of New Mexico do not wish for weapons of war. We hope for a viable and rich future for our children and families that include quality education, healthcare, public transportation, food, and jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was just announced earlier this week that
We need your name, please.
my name is Shayla.
Thank you.
It was just announced earlier this week that mining at a spot near the Grand Canyon has recently started this week. And it kind of feels like, do we even have a say of, the expansion of this plutonium pit production? If there's already mining that's already happening, anyway, it's just with plutonium pits being produced and the uranium that's mined, there is no proper way or there is no efficient way for any of those lands to be cleaned up or remediated to date. Everything just kind of gets buried under a cement rug and then capped, and then they try and keep an eye on it. But those things leak and they crack and the aquifers are contaminated. No aquifer has ever been returned to anything that is drinkable. Livestock and just everything is just killed, and just land that is just turned into a giant cemetery in areas that are nearby. But, just people here think that it's a dead zone. There's nobody that lives there, but there are indigenous people and cultures that are living and thriving. And it just also feels that the Los Alamos labs and the budget, that they've pitched for this and the delay of when it's actually going to be finally built, it just feels like it's an opportunity for people to make money on something that's never efficiently going to, come about. We're already in this war, and all of, these pits are just going to go to other countries, I imagine, or I'm going to just stop myself there, but I just fear that this isn't a smart use of our money or land or resources.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in this room before we go to the folks who are watching on Zoom who wants to come to the podium and have 2 minutes to address the governing body? Madam Clerk, are there folks on the Zoom who want to speak to the governing body now.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Bob White.
Yes, my name is Bob White. I live in Park Plazas. Mr. Mayor, councilors, I've appeared before you before. I've written emails for coming up on 3.5 years on the issue of what do we do on the plaza. And I really think, given the time that has passed, y'all need to put somebody in charge of setting a process, give them a timeline, 30 days, 60 days, to come up with the process to bring to the governing body to decide how we're going to move forward. Because right now, even if it started tomorrow, be hard pressed to get it down before the 4-year anniversary. And the two concerns I have that go along with that. The first is almost immediately after the monument was pulled down, I contacted folks on the council and the mayor's office about the need to do a structural examination, an engineering examination, to see if it was viable to do anything with the obelisk, given what happened to it. That really needs to happen before you can go forward. And finally, before I run out of time, there's been a lot of talk recently about transparency and communication within city government. I think the way to start to show that you're really making movement on transparency is to step back and do what should have been done in October of that year and have an independent agency or investigator come in and take a look at everything that went across the board within city government and any communications between the city and other agencies regarding what happened to the obelisk. That would go a long ways towards reestablishing confidence on not just this particular issue, but on the city's willingness to be open and transparent in its dealings with its citizens. And, you know,
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
I think
thank
your
you.
time's expired, but thank you very much. Madam Clerk, we have others in the Zoom room.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Stephanie Benenato.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Stephanie Benenato. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Great. I wanted to bring to your attention a problem with the city ethics code. I don't see anywhere in there where the city clerk can decide that your complaint should not go to the ethics board. And not this city clerk, but the one before her made that decision on a complaint that I filed that is clearly grounded in the preface of the ethics code. And the current clerk, Ms. Cardenas, is, you know, I'm going to refile that, but I, you know, probably will need leeway there on dates or perhaps not. I also hope that if it snows this evening or tomorrow morning, that the plows will get out early, because even if the city decides to have yet another holiday, there are people who actually have to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. People like who work in restaurants and hotels and there's guests there, or hospital workers. And in my opinion, really, it's easier to get out when it's early in the morning and the snow's still on the ground and not too many other people are out. I think it's kind of a bad optic when you have like 3.5 day holidays or weekends in a row, and now a third one coming or fourth one coming up that's 3 days. And I don't know about motivation in early on in the new year. I don't know what kind of resolution that sets. In fact, I was just talking to a former city worker who told me the biggest adjustment to working in private industry was that he actually had to work So I thought that was sort of a telling comment. Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you. I think your time's expired. Appreciate it. Are there others in the Zoom room, Madam Clerk?
No, Mayor, there are no other hands raised in the attendees.
Okay. If you're here and you want to take a turn, we haven't run out of the opportunity, so please come to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. My name is Brian Haas. I just wanted to say that we're very lucky. We're blessed to live in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And when it comes to the plutonium industry and the nuclear arms industry, it's very, very difficult to find any long-term benefits to these industries other than the short-term payout that's provided. And so all of us that came here today, we're relying on all of you. Some of you aren't looking at me while I'm talking, I notice. Thank you, Mayor, for your eye contact. We're relying on all of you to stand up to the plutonium industry, to the uranium industry, and to the nuclear arms industry. That's your job as council people. If you're interested in learning about some of the long-term negative effects of these industries, I highly recommend a new documentary. It's called First We Bombed New Mexico, and it was done by Lois Lippman. And if you're at all interested in a very quick study on the negative effects of the uranium mining industry, the plutonium industry, and the nuclear industry, I highly recommend this documentary. I was lucky enough to see it at the Santa Fe Film Festival, and I cried on and off the entire time. It absolutely blew my mind. And again, it's called First We Bombed New Mexico. And if you're looking to the EPA to come in and protect this city, it absolutely will not happen. There's a term for what's going on with the EPA right now. It's called regulatory capture. And we're at the point where we cannot rely on the EPA or these governing bodies to protect you and our families and our citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room who wants to take the opportunity to come speak to the governing body? Now's the time. Okay, Madam Clerk, I think we'll go back to the regular order of business then.
The next item on the agenda is matters from the city manager.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor and councilors. As I said earlier, welcome to our new councilors. Welcome back to all of our returning councilors. Tonight actually marks, I think, 2 years that you all voted to give me this job. So I know what it's like to feel new and like you're learning your way out. So I look forward to working with all of you in the coming year. Still need to send out an email to all of you to set up standing meetings for those of you that want it. That's forthcoming. We've been a little busy, but we'll get there. Right out of the gate, want to flag that city offices will be closed on Monday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so that is coming our way. It didn't seem appropriate to bring this up during the audit update, but we wanted to make sure that you all were aware that we have received the grant agreements from this state for the fiscal year 2021 capital appropriation. Staff are working on those grant agreements right now, and our goal is to have those work through the process for your approval at the next governing body meeting at the end of the month. So there'll be more information coming on that. And I do think they'll work their way through the committee process. A couple quick personal things. Want to offer congratulations to the new County Commission Chair, Hank Hughes, and to the new County Vice Chair, Camila Bustamante. Wanted to flag as well, just for those who are watching at home, to say I offer my condolences as well for the loss of State Senator Mary Jane Garcia from Doñana County, a longstanding state senator who really has done a great deal of work across New Mexico. Thank you as well for voting earlier tonight in approval of the executive assistant position within my office. I want to talk about two things that are snow related real quick, in part as a resource for you all and to for the public as well. The first is you all, the returning counselors all received our updated inclement weather policies back in November when I sent them to all city staff. I passed them out actually tonight to the two new counselors so they can review it. If you ever have questions about why we shut down or how it works, I'm always happy to chat about that. The first thing I want to talk about is snow clearing. And so right out of the gate, I want to let folks know that if anybody has access to a computer and they Google Santa Fe snow removal, it will bring you to the website on our City of Santa Fe website page that lays out some best tips, what to do in case of an emergency, what happens if your pipes freeze, but it also details some of the information I'm going to give you now about what's the city's policy around snow removal. We have a tiered system where our team goes through tier 1 streets first, tier 2, tier 3, and they work their way down. The tier 1 or priority 1 streets are what are considered sort of the main arteries for the city that provide access for police, fire, ambulances, buses, et cetera. These would be what you would expect, streets like Rodeo Road, Airport Road, St. Michael's Drive, Old Pecos Trail, Alameda, those sorts of roads. The next tier down in terms of what gets cleared second are the commercial routes. So some roads like South Meadows and Jaguar, Camino Carlos Rey, Galisteo and Don Gaspar, Siringo, those are all in that second category. And then the third tier are what are some of the residential streets, Richards, Governor Miles, Old Santa Fe Trail, San Mateo, these sort of third tier category streets. I will flag for you that St. Francis Drive is still under the jurisdiction of the New Mexico Department of Transportation, and so they are responsible for clearing St. Francis Drive. We're not able to do that. So again, if anyone wants to Google snow removal Santa Fe, the map is on there. You can find a bunch of information there that might be helpful to understanding why some roads go faster than others. And then two, there actually is if you Google snow, ice, or removal requests throughout the city's normal solve a problem system, any resident can go to that site and say, hi, I live on X street. We're having a real big problem with ice on the street or snow, cars are slipping. Can you help us? City staff check that site twice a day and dispatch city resources out to try to correct those problems and help clear that ice and that snow. So that's a real thing. Excuse me. One common misnomer I want to sort of debunk is our streets team and our streets crews that clear the streets are genuinely some of the hardest working employees in the city of Santa Fe. They don't wait till 5 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to go out. Frankly, most snow events, they are out while the snow is falling in the dark of night doing the work. They work incredibly hard. And I appreciate the frustration of some folks. I think this week, some of the streets have not melted as fast as we're accustomed to. And frankly, that's really due in large part to how cold it has been. Our beautiful 300 plus days of sunshine a year often go a long way to help a lot of our streets thaw out, to help make sure that the cinder and the salt that the crews are laying down is activating. That has contributed to some of the delays this week, but the team is really doing an extraordinary job. They work around the clock. And I know that the mayor has had an initial conversation with me to see if I can't work with our public works director to see what we can do to provide additional support to our streets crews. I don't know if that means we need to look at funding new trucks, more staff, et cetera, but we know that public safety is a priority and we take it very seriously. Along that same line, I want to sort of just have a brief conversation with you all around the procedures for if we call what we would call a delayed open, which is to open city government offices late because of weather. What would be an early close, which is less likely to happen. It's been uncommon in my tenure that happens, or the full closure. And what I want to flag more than anything else is the seriousness in which I take, and I know my team does, making these decisions. And we know that there's a balancing act between ensuring our residents have access to the city services and to city facilities, but also balancing that against ensuring the safety of our employees who are commuting into work. And so that folks are aware, our policy provides that in a normal, like we're expecting snow tomorrow now, so if it snows Thursday night, 10 o'clock, midnight, 2 in the morning. Our goal through our policy is that by 5 in the morning, I have made a decision as to whether we'll open on time, to have a delayed open, or whether we will close for the whole day. We don't use the term 2-hour delay for the city because we have a number of facilities that open at different times, and that's very confusing. And so that's why you may see where the schools might say 2-hour delay. Everyone knows what that means. The city commentary will say we'll open at a specific time, usually 10 a.m. Okay. And so what happens in the dark of the 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock window is that I'm getting text messages from Public Works, Emergency Management, sometimes from fire or police if reports from their crews who've been out overnight. Over the last year plus, we've developed a good working relationship with the superintendent of schools and the Santa Fe County manager. We're all texting back and forth at that early hour to try to come to group decisions about what's best, what are our crews hearing, what are your crews hearing, what have you learned, et cetera. And so what happens hopefully before 5 a.m. is that I will notify a number of city staff who then go to work of what the decision is. So if we're going to open regularly, we don't normally do anything. But if we do decide to delay or close, an email goes out to all city staff, ideally before 5 o'clock. And again, that's many employees have to be to work by 6 or 7, so their facilities are ready to open for residents at a certain time. And so that 5 o'clock time, that's the reason for that early window. All city employees are notified that way. And then our team does a number of things. It is posted on the City of Santa Fe website. On the main page, if you scroll to the very bottom of the page where it says news and announcements, if the city has elected to delay opening or to close, we will post it there. Our city staff contact all of the TV networks. So you see the scrolls at the bottom of the TV screen on their websites. They make the big list. As soon as we make a decision, they notify there so residents can look there as well. A press release is put out to all of the media outlets so that they know, and all of the city's social media outlets are notified as well or updated as well to reflect a delayed opening or closure. So for counselors, if you're hearing from constituents who are frustrated that they showed up at a facility this week and it was closed, we don't have a process to safely have city staff go into the office to post notices on every door to say we're not opening. What we would ask is that we encourage residents to sign up to follow the city on our social media, to make sure they're checking television if they have access to a television. There's a phone, pardon me, there's a phone line that residents can call if they don't have access to a computer that will give them the updated news. There's a variety of ways that folks can do this. So if there has been weather and there has been some sort of a weather event, probably in our case snow, we would ask folks before they run out to the Southside Library or SALP or whatever the facility is to stop, check the closest resource they have access to, call the city, the main number, and will be a message there. But we are doing all we can to communicate to the community so that they are aware and they don't unnecessarily go out to a site in advance. So again, just want to stress, this is a serious thing that we take. We recognize the great need that our residents have for our facilities and the access to it. We don't take it lightly. And we're doing it for the safety of our crew. I will add as well, so the public is aware, the city did institute an official remote work policy last year. And under the current policy, if an employee is scheduled to be working remotely on the day that we call a snow day, excuse me, pardon me, that employee is still expected to work remotely that day. And so the senior staff there have been some who've asked us to consider a new policy that if any employee has access to work remotely and we have a snow day, that they do work remotely. We've not instituted that yet, and we're just beginning to have that conversation at a senior staff level. But the current policy right now is if an employee is scheduled to work remotely on that day, they are expected to do that. So anyway, snow. We're expecting more on Thursday. Please be careful. Please pay attention, and let the city know if you need help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Madam Clerk, the next item on the agenda, please.
The next item is matters from the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor Weber, councilors. Good to see everyone. Thank you for those of you who were able to participate in the study sessions last week. I know we all appreciated your questions. If you weren't able to be there, hopefully you got the presentation materials. If you have any questions, we're happy to meet with you individually about them or follow up. And I think it also can be conversations about, is this something we can change? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. So Open Meetings Act, we don't have the authority to change that ourselves. But if it's something about a local rule that we don't like, that's something that can be changed. So, and we're happy to have those conversations. Let's see. And also thanks for having fun with the Jeopardy game. I had fun as well. So thanks for your participation with that. I did send out an email today, so if you didn't see it, please look for it, about the opportunity to get a more in-depth litigation briefing, more in-depth than we would typically do at a quarterly update. So I want to kind of restart the year with giving the opportunity for the new counselors to get that catch-up opportunity, but also if any other counselors want to take advantage of that, we're happy to provide that time and that more in-depth conversation. So please let me know, and then I'll send you available times for that. And then for the new counselors, I think I already sent you some available times. So let me know if those work or if you prefer a different time, and we'll try to accommodate your schedule. Because I think that will really be helpful just diving in later this month when we do a quarterly update. So I'm scheduled to do that the end of January. And so ideally we'd try to accomplish those briefings beforehand so that those of you who haven't been here are caught up on cases. And we can also use our time efficiently during that executive session. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Madam City Attorney. Next item is matters from the city clerk. Madam Clerk.
I have nothing to report. Just want to thank you all for attending the study sessions. And that's it. We'll move on to communications from the governing body.
Fantastic. And for this initial council meeting, I will start with Councilor Castro, and we'll just work our way down the dais.
Just want to thank everyone for being so welcoming and wonderful to Councilor Faulkner and I. I know it's been an interesting onboarding. We have a lot of work to do, and so I'm excited to get started on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to welcome our new council members. I'm excited to work with you both. Welcome. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. I also wanted to take time to recognize my supervisor, David Vincent, who was the principal at Santa Fe High School. His last day is actually tomorrow, so he still is. But I wanted to take time to recognize him. I think it's very rare where you come across true leaders, leaders that are like selfless, leaders that do what's right and don't do things that are for their own self-benefit. So we had a really good one at Santa Fe High. He has moved on, but I want to recognize him. I know as someone who is in leadership, to have someone above you that you can still learn from is something really incredible and rare these days. So I'm sorry that he is leaving, but I appreciated the knowledge that he left Santa Fe High with and the love he left it with. I know teachers and students gained a lot from him in the short time he was there. So I just wanted to take time and recognize a Santa Fe leader in our community that served our youth well. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Besides the city teams that are working to clear our streets, I want to give a shout out to our environmental services team. Last week before the storm hit, usually I put out my trash receptacles about 7 a.m. and those guys were there at 6:30. They beat me to the punch. So this week I was there before the sun even came up, made sure I didn't miss them. So they're hard at work, and just want to give them a shout out. Councilor Castro, Councilor Faulkner, welcome aboard. Look forward to working with you, moving the city forward. If you've got any questions, let me know. Sometimes it can be like going through a maze, but hey, we're all here to help you. So welcome aboard. That's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome to the new counselors. I'm looking forward to spending time with both of you. I get to spend time in the office with Councilor Castro. It's been nice having someone else in the office with me. If you haven't arranged to take a ride on the snowplows, there is no, like I've said, there's no reason to stand in line at Disney World. You just go get on that plow, and it's the ride of a lifetime. I can tell you that. It's like having an e-ticket at Disneyland. The skill level taken to drive those plows and the concentration that it takes is an amazing thing to see. And, you know, every street doesn't get plowed immediately. That's how it works. We need new plows. That's another thing that we're going to be facing. We need new plows. But those guys work super hard. They stay cheerful about it. And, you know, if you've done a ride around with the police, I really encourage you to do a ride around with the snowplow guys because, you know, don't just stick to your district. Go right up there to Sierra del Norte and District 1 and find out what a real sled ride is. You won't forget it, believe me. So big shout out to those guys. Same with environmental services. I couldn't believe that my trash got picked up Monday morning. It was amazing because it's quite a hill where I live, and they did terrific. So a big thank you. Stay safe, be careful, slow down. The snow, ices, I don't care if you have four-wheel drive or not. We always laugh and say four-wheel drive, you just get stuck deeper and further away from home. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Faulkner, welcome.
I want to thank everyone on the council who's reached out to Alma and I. It's definitely a learning experience, and you guys have all made it easy by being so welcoming. And I'd like to say thanks staff, because we've been working on a couple of things that around disabilities, and they've really been putting a lot of work into it. Jeff Norris has been doing a bang up job. So is the city clerk's office. So I just want to thank all you guys for all the work that you do. IT, like, it's a heavy lift to get onboarded, and staff has been amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Mayor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Just echo what's already been said. Welcome to the new counselors. I've enjoyed my meetings with you as preliminary starting points, and look forward to having more opportunities to interact and work together. So welcome. I know I would agree it's a lot, and you'll be walking in rhythm in no time. So anyway, welcome. I also want to call out streets. We've had a couple of constituents in District 2 asking for help in particular areas, and both constituent services and streets have been very responsive, and I really am appreciative of that, especially some of these streets have elderly families, elderly members, and of course, this is a very difficult time for folks in that demographic to get around. So really appreciate the extra effort, and also just the constant effort that it takes when we have snowstorms back to back the way we've had, and the cold temperatures, as City Manager Blair has flagged. We usually, you know, we have a day of snow and then it all melts, and then we have a few days before we get a new storm. Rarely do we have this kind of back to back where it feels like we're living in a ski area. So anyway, appreciate the effort, and just want to call out the hard work of city staff in this exceptional time, and enjoy the snow because it is beautiful. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Counselor Cassett.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, just really want to welcome our new counselors, Counselor Castro, Counselor Faulkner. It's already been just such a pleasure working with both of you. And I am really excited to continue that work, and now that you're here. So congratulations again, and welcome. As everyone said, please reach out. It definitely is a bit of a whirlwind at the beginning. So never feel that any question is a silly question to ask, because there's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, thank you to the streets team. I know that it is quite a bit to get these cleared. I want to thank City Manager Blair for going over some of these conversations around where are the notifications? How do we make sure that we get this information out? Why aren't things posted on the front doors? So I think that that's really helpful, because I have gotten some questions from constituents, and they're actually very obvious answers when you lay them out. But I really appreciate you taking the time to let the public know about that, for where they should look, and just assume that if there's been snow, take a look at those areas to see what's going on. Also want to add my condolences to all parents like me who have had multiple snow days after a 2-week holiday break in the middle of cold and flu season. I understand you. I see you. This is we'll get through this together. So I know a lot of parents like myself are busy juggling all these tiny humans staying home a lot longer and trying to figure all that out. So appreciate the conversations around what we can also do for city staff that are in that position, because I know a lot of them are getting school cancellations and scrambling to figure out what to do with their kiddos when they're supposed to still work. So I will pass it on.
Thank you. Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to wish everybody a happy new year. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Counselor Chris Rivera and Councilwoman Renee Villarreal. I had to leave the meeting before we got to our comments last meeting. Definitely my gratitude to them for the time that they spent here working for the city, working for the people of the city. And it doesn't go without notice to people that they work a lot long hours, have jobs, so many things to do, but still come every day to be attentive to the community. Welcome aboard to the 2 new counselors. Look forward to working with you all. And again, also my thanks to everyone in the city, not just every single person that has something to do with the way that this city operates and moves forward. And once again, thank you all.
Thank you, Counselor. Seems like a long time ago that we had that inauguration. But it was not that long ago, and it was a great celebration. And thanks to everybody who participated and brought family and friends, and thanks to our team that organized it, structured it, got the participation of the different figures who came to help us out. Our MC did a great job, President Rowley, and that really was a lovely ceremony, and congratulations to everybody who participated. Same for New Year's Eve. I don't know if you remember it. It was a few snowstorms ago, but that was also a great evening and a lot of fun and a great turnout on the plaza. And there is no place that celebrates New Year's Eve the way we do, and we should always be very proud of how we ring in the new year. And it's just a beautiful place to be at midnight when we turn to a new year. I had the great fun of going out to visit with our streets team last week, early in the morning. And what the city manager Blair said is absolutely right. You could not find a harder working group of people. And it's not just snow, it's year round. It's filling potholes. This year, the number was in excess of 7,000 filled potholes by that team. When I was there in the morning, there was an expectation of snow that night. They were all reporting for duty, or the first shift was reporting for duty at midnight. They not only do the work of snow removal, but as Councilor Lindell said, they are in the tough job of maintaining, fixing, gluing back together, using baling wire and chewing gum to keep those machines going. And we owe them a huge debt of gratitude and some better machines in the year ahead. There's a lot of equipment in our city that is past its shelf life, and we just keep asking the same folks to maintain it and make sure it works. And we've actually got to step up and get the machinery they need. I think the news we heard about the progress on the audit and the order to print is great news, and it continues to keep us moving in the right direction. And with the confidence that we are getting the audits done as our Director Oster said would happen. And tip of the hat to her for continuing to just plug away at that every single day of the year. It's great to have everybody back together with new faces and old faces and some new seating arrangements. I'm going to have to learn where to look all over again. But it's really it's a treat to have that kind of energy and fresh ideas coming into the governing body. So welcome to you both. And thank you for what I'm sure felt to you like an onboarding that wasn't easy, but from where I'm sitting, it was just really great. And I'll reiterate the offer that the city manager made. I've had standing meetings with any member of the city council who wants one. Sign up. They're free of charge. And the coffee is offered as part of the deal. So thank you all and welcome on board. Madam Clerk, what's our next item?
Our next item is introduction of legislation. 16A is consideration of a resolution. It's sponsored by Councilor Amanda Chavez. It's a resolution committing to being a more age-friendly city and enrolling in the American Association of Retired Persons, AARP, Age-Friendly States and Communities Network, which, to the extent it is possible, will be a process that incorporates universal design principles.
Counselor, you want to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I have a lot to say, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I want to thank AARP. I know Gary Williams is here. I also worked with Joseph Sanchez. When I first came on, this was something important to me because it addressed accessibility. And at the time, well, I still continue to work with the special education population, but at the time I was director and I saw the benefits for individuals with disabilities. So thanks to our city attorney's team, we were able to really pull in the benefits of age-friendly, which is making our city accessible, but also looking at how we service our senior population. But we were also able to look at universal design and how we could better serve individuals with disability, how we could build a city of Santa Fe that keeps all of those in mind, including those that need us to keep them in mind the most, which we often tend to forget. So we got really creative in pulling all of the statistics around and benefits of both age-friendly, but also universal design. Thank you to City Manager Blair because he was a huge champion in this process and willing to kind of take on navigating how as a city we could look at what we're already doing and what we can do better. This consists of a 5-year commitment. It involves surveying our senior population, applying for becoming a part of the AARP network, implementing improvements based on the data we receive from the survey, and kind of continuing a cycle through evaluation and doing it again and again and better. So I think it's very exciting for Santa Fe. And I think it's a way for us to not only be city officials, but advocates for populations that need our support the most. So I'm very excited about this and I appreciate all the staff that helped put this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Madam Clerk, what's our next item, please?
Our next item, Mayor, is appointments. 21A is appointment of Councilor Signe Lindell as Mayor Pro Tem.
Your motion?
Move to approve.
Second? Is there discussion? Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Certainly, Mayor. Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Castro,
Yes.
Councilor Chavez,
Yes.
Councilor Faulkner,
Yes.
Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell, Mayor Weber,
Yes.
motion passed.
I want to thank Councilor Lindell for taking this on. Again, it's a thankless task and it's good of her to step up and do it, and I appreciate it. And I know you'll help the whole council operate better. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mayor, the next item is an announcement of appointment of Councilor Carol Romero Worth as parliamentarian, and no vote is required.
Right. And thanks again for stepping up and continuing to play this role. I think you've got a great knowledge of our rules as evidenced by the briefings earlier, and thanks for doing it. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Next item is 21C. It's the appointment of the city council committees.
Your motion?
Move to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Could you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Certainly, Mayor. Counselor Cassett?
Yes.
Counselor Castro?
Yes.
Counselor Chavez?
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner?
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Lindell? Counselor Romero Worth?
Yes.
Mayor Weber?
Yes.
Motion passed.
And thank you to all the council members for sitting down with me and walking through those, giving me the benefit of your preferences. I appreciate it, and looking forward to working with everybody. Anything else on the agenda, Madam Clerk?
No, Mayor.
Is this your last city council meeting? You're going to leave us. So I know this isn't on the agenda, but I really appreciate all your hard work and all the time you spent with us night after night into the late wee hours of the morning. You're headed back to Minnesota, Michigan. Oh, go blue. Well, thanks for being with us and for all your hard work and your solid journalism. We're going to miss you. You're always welcome back here, and you know that. With that, we are adjourned. Land speed record.
Let's get used to 8.